Well, thank you all. It's good to see you. I'm, of course, happy to be joined by my friends and colleagues, Tom Tillis, Ted Budd, and Shelley Moore Capito. And look, they're all doing as well as they can, as much as they can, to make sure that, I think in Shelley's case, Appalachia is prepared for, God forbid, the next storm. But for Tom and Ted to make sure that we deal with what happened. I mean, I wanted to come down here for a few reasons. Number one, just my simple message to the people of Appalachia is that we haven't forgotten you. We love you. We want you to have the best Christmas that you possibly can have, despite the circumstances. And I know that a lot of people in this neck of the woods feel left behind and forgotten. I just wanted to make them feel that their government leaders actually care about them, because we do. And certainly when this administration changes hands in the next 45 days, we're going to do everything that we can to help people rebuild, to get them back on their feet, to bring some commerce back to this area, but most importantly, to allow people to live in their homes and do what they need to do. I think there are a couple of very immediate concerns, things that we're worried about. One is, of course, that because so many people live in effectively a designated floodplain, Ted and Tom have done some really important work to try to get the Biden administration, to try to get FEMA to actually provide the waiver necessary so that people can actually live in mobile homes in places that have been designated as flood areas. If you don't do that, you're not going to allow people to actually be able to celebrate Christmas around their families. We need to make that happen. These guys have done good work. They've started the Biden administration to actually respond to this request and allow us to get the residences and the homes that just on a temporary basis in the areas that have been designated floodplains. If you don't do that, there isn't a non-floodplain where you can actually put people. You've got to be able to get the at least temporary and medium-term housing. The second thing that I take away from this visit is that we have really got to do a better job when it comes to communications infrastructure in this country. It is frankly a disgrace, given that we have Starlink, given that we have access to modern technology, that we have unable to communicate with law enforcement, with EMS services, and with their loved ones weeks after this storm hit. And one of the things that we're going to focus on in the next administration is to make sure that our communications infrastructure is in a place that if, God forbid, another area like this is affected by the storm, at least we have the communication in place to minimize the damage and to allow people to communicate with the people that they love. So, look, I've seen a lot of good here. I've seen a lot of people, the best spirit in the world, the best human beings in the world. They've had a lot of loss of life. They've had a lot of lives and possessions, but they're rebuilding. They love their communities, and we love their communities too, and we're going to try to help them. Questions?
JD, what's the budget?
Sorry, could you speak up? Just the cars are loud. Yeah.
You're here obviously to survey damage and show support to these families, but I wanted to get your an opportunity to ask you about Hexeth. You spoke about it this morning. Have you talked to Senator Ernst, and has she addressed any concerns with you? You and Trump both support. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so look, guys, we're here to survey damage and provide support to the people of Western North Carolina, and make it clear that their government, and in particular our administration, is not going to forget them. And that's why we're here. I'll answer one question about Pete Hexeth, because I know that's what people are focused on. Look, importantly, Pete Hexeth is going to get his appearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee, not a sham hearing before the American media. We believe that Pete Hexeth is the right guy to lead the Department of Defense. That's why President Trump nominated him. We're not abandoning this nomination. We're not going to make it easy for people to allow them. Who our Secretary of Defense is Donald J. Trump, who just won an election by a very significant consent of the United States Senate. That's who determines who the Secretary of Defense is. I fully support Pete. I think Pete's going to get confirmed, and we are completely behind him. I have talked to Joni. I've talked to a number of my colleagues about this nomination and about other nominations. All I'm asking is that people actually allow the Senate process to work. We do not determine important government officials based on anonymous sourcing from the American media. We determine who our officials are through the nomination process, the advice and consent process of the United States Senate. That's how it should happen, and that's how the president's nominees are going to work through this process.
Sir, could you talk about the impact that private citizens and groups like Samaritan's Purse have had in recovery in this storm?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and look, there are so many layers to recovery, and unfortunately, one of the biggest complaints that I've heard today is that a lot of insurance companies who should be doing their job and should be doing right by these people are not actually stepping up, are not giving people what was promised. And when you have big gaps left by these companies, unfortunately, a lot of private citizens have to step in to fill those gaps, and that's exactly what Samaritan's Purse is doing. If you think about just the nitty-gritty of this, okay, so you have this home, there's a lot of water damage. Does that water damage become really bad mold damage? What they're doing right now, Samaritan's Purse in the home that we see behind us, is that they're doing a lot of work to make sure that the mold damage doesn't become even worse than it already is, so that maybe, God willing, the people can actually live in this home again, and that we can minimize the amount of damage even further. There's a lot of just on-the-ground, nitty-gritty work that's being done by organizations like Samaritan's Purse, by people in North Carolina. I met a guy earlier who's been doing, private pilots who are flying needed medical resources, food resources, water into this community. There are a lot of people doing a lot of good, and I take a certain inspiration given that we are right on the cusp of the Christmas season in this country. A lot of inspiration that I think a lot of people are living out Christ's Great Commission as we enter this Christmas season. This is a Christmas season that's got a lot of grief for a lot of people, a lot of sadness for a lot of people in Western North Carolina, but I think there is going to be a lot of joy and a lot of celebration despite the sorrow, because the people of North Carolina are taking care of their own, and that's exactly as it should be, but they deserve some help, and they're going to get it from their government. Yeah.
What in 45 days, what is one of the first things you want people in this area to see change under your administration that starts in January?
Well, I think, one, hopefully it doesn't take 45 days for this to happen, but as I mentioned earlier, Tom and Ted have explicitly asked the Biden administration to grant the FEMA waiver that would allow mobile homes to come back to this area, that would actually give people some short and maybe some medium-term housing. I mean, Tom and Ted are welcome to talk about that if they want to say more. I hope it doesn't take 45 days, but if, God forbid, it takes 45 days, that's something that is going to change immediately under President Trump's leadership. Think about it. The argument here is that you can't allow people to put mobile homes in a floodplain, in an area that has the risk of flood damage. Well, that's pretty much this entire area, an area of the state of Massachusetts. If you don't grant a waiver, you're effectively telling people they've got to move hundreds of miles away and do it 2 weeks before Christmas. It's ridiculous, it's atrocious, and we need a government that responds quickly to the needs of its citizens. So much of the frustration at FEMA, at everybody else, it's not malice. I don't believe that the officials of the Biden administration are intentionally doing bad things, but it's bureaucratic red tape, it's slowness, it's a bureaucracy that is moving at the speed of a glacier when what you need is people to respond to the concerns of the people of Western North Carolina.
Senator, you said something a minute ago about not wanting the people here to feel forgotten. Do
Yep.
you believe that the government has forgotten the people here? And secondly, a quick second question, do you expect to accompany Kash Patel next week when he's making the rounds on the Senate for his nomination?
So I don't know what I'll be doing next week. Look, we're fully behind Kash's nomination, and I'm not sure where I'm going to be tomorrow, much less next week. But we're fully supportive of Kash's nomination. I actually think he's in a very good spot for his nomination. Look, to me, the question, ma'am, is not whether I feel that the government has left the people of Western North Carolina behind. It's what do the people of Western North Carolina feel? And to a person, every single person I've talked to today, from local officials to the people who used to live in this house, feel like their government isn't paying attention to their concerns. Sometimes that's just a matter of showing up, which is why I'm here today. Sometimes that means granting the request of 2 senators who are really trying to do their job for the people of the state. Sometimes it means something else. But yeah, I think the government could be and should be doing a lot more to make the people of Western North Carolina feel like their president and their leadership cares about them. I certainly care about them, and we're going to keep the pressure on as much as we can over the next 45 days.
So have you spoken with President-elect Trump about what kind of portfolio you want to take on as vice president, and would consider taking on something like overseeing the federal response to disasters like this?
Look, I mean, we're going to work on a lot as vice president. The president's going to work on a lot as president of the United States. We're certainly focused today on the people of North Carolina, and I'm sure that when I'm vice president, I'm going to be in a much better job to help people out here in Western North Carolina. That's what I care about. Any other questions, ma'am?
Yeah, Politico reported earlier this week that senior officials in FEMA have disaster we served with immigration, similar to the $155 million diverted from the federal government to the disaster fund in 2019. What is your response to this?
Well, it is irony big enough that it could crush a vehicle, that the Biden administration FEMA is worried that Donald J. Trump is going to divert resources away from disaster relief and towards immigration. That's what they've been doing during their entire 4 years of leadership, is diverting disaster relief from the people who need it to the illegal immigration crisis that their policies have created. I happen to believe that we can walk and chew gum at the same time in the Trump administration. Yes, we are going to secure the southern border and take that concern seriously. We can do that while simultaneously looking after the people of Western North Carolina who have had this terrible storm, and now they're trying to rebuild from it. You know, I want Tom Tillis to replace me, but unfortunately he's got a job here in the state of North Carolina and will, so long as the people of North Carolina are willing to have him serve. Again, we're focused on the people here in Western North Carolina, and that's what we're going to focus on the remainder of our short visit. I'll take one more question before we hit the road.
Yeah, Riley.
Well, you already asked a question. Anybody who hasn't asked a question, you asked a question too. Anybody else? Don't be shy.
I want to ask about Starlink.
Yeah, so, go ahead, man. You know, the most impactful thing, and I heard, you know, I heard a lot of stories, but the two in particular that jump out at me is, if you look at the family, this house behind us, the family that lives there, their grandfather lived in this trailer that's right behind us, and he had to crawl up the mountain because the water was rising so fast, and he obviously wanted to save his own life, but was also trying to save the life of a beloved pet. I met earlier a bunch of firefighters at the fire station, just probably, I don't know, 5-minute drive from here. And one of the firefighters told me about his colleague who had lost his life saving people as the waters rose so quickly. And not just a firefighter, but also his nephew died and his son almost died. And I met his son, and I met his mom, I met his daughter, and I met his wife. Just the best people in the world. And I think that's really, you know, when I think about Western North Carolina, that's who represents this state and the people of the Appalachian region in North Carolina so well, is a firefighter willing to risk his life to save a member of his community, and then his family still standing there willing to tell his story, willing to make sure that the memory of their father inspires people instead of forgotten. It's just an amazing thing. We have the best country, we have the best people, and the Appalachian people of North Carolina, I think, are the very best of a very great country. And again, I'm mindful that in a few weeks, most Americans will celebrate Christmas, and I can't think of a better representative of the Christmas spirit and of the Christian faith than the people who have lost a lot, who are still grieving, but are helping their neighbors rebuild. We should all take inspiration from that as Americans, and I hope in the next few weeks that we do. God bless you guys. Thank you.
Good job.